something that I focused on when I was a neighborhood association leader about trying to make our city more accountable to our neighborhoods. I do give my hats off to the men and women of the Department of Public Works who are doing what they can to clean our streets. That being said, I think most constituents don't feel like there is real responsiveness on the part of that very large bureaucracy or the many large bureaucracies that are delivering city services. And so one thing that I would do is to replicate a model that I have had in my district of setting up more neighborhood councils that involve merchants and neighbors and neighborhood associations working in tandem with city workers to focus on the problems in a particular neighborhood, whether it be the potholes, whether it be the dirty streets, whether it be the drug dealer around the corner. We need to have much more dialogue so that you as our San Franciscans are not necessarily have to come to us as your representatives to get work done, but you can work and interface directly with city workers.
What about, this question goes around, so some people say, what about like a fine for litter?
We actually do have a whole lot of fines and a whole lot of fees that we charge folks. And actually, in my first year in office, I created essentially a fee system for properties that were not taking care of blight and or otherwise being eyesores in the neighborhood. So we've actually gone down that road, and it's helped to some degree. But I think, again, making sure that we've got accountability between city departments and city workers and our neighborhoods, that is the key.
Phil Ting, if you happen to get elected, what are your top 3 priorities for your first 100 days?
We've got to make sure we have a budget that's balanced for the short and long term. We need to create more jobs in the city so we can grow our way out of our revenue issue. And we got to tackle Muni. I won't say we're going to fix Muni, but I think we got to put together a plan to start implementing the TEP, the Transit Effectiveness Plan, day one.
So, get jobs, fix the budget, and fix Muni in 100 days? The last guy that promised that was Willie Brown.
That's what we're going to work on.
Well, what do you think? What do you think next? You might, if you had the power of the pen and you're in there, what would be the first thing you'd do? And what, for example, what would you like to do the minute you got in there?
I think the minute we got in there, Nat Ford talked about how it's going to take, it took 2 years to do this Transit Effectiveness Plan. It's taking 3 years for us to even hear about it, and 6 more years to implement it. I really don't understand why. I think we need to start rolling out various issues like, should we have fewer bus stops? Can we time stoplights? Those are things that are going to impact people's daily commute today.
Okay. Bevan Dufty. San Francisco voters have a way of saying, a couple of things at once, sometimes on the same ballot, sometimes ballot after ballot. For example, we have a mandated staffing level in the police department of, I believe it's 1,971 officers.
Yes.
We're going to have, at the same time, we have mandated no brownouts, blackouts in firehouses. One costs a tremendous amount of overtime to fulfill, that's the firehouses. The other one is you have cops retiring and leaving in the next couple of years, so you're going to find yourself with a drain there. What would be your answer?
Well, first of all, we have to have academy classes, and we have to have officers coming into this department. So as our economy improves, my top priority is going to be to have more academy classes, because these are individuals that are coming to serve for 25 to 30 years. I was adamantly opposed to closing firehouses, and I think you can see from the tragic fire in Diamond Heights that occurred that Digby Station was slated to be closed. And the reality is that the recommendations to close those stations was based upon calls for service. And the truth of the matter is the calls for service south of Market and in the Tenderloin have a huge number of false alarms, which you don't have in Diamond Heights. And I didn't feel the criteria was the same or accurate. I think cities exist around public safety. What I am going to be is an outcome there. We spend $13.5 million a year on the top 225 street drugs. Those are people that are going in and out of jail, shelter, treatment, emergency rooms, paramedics, police officers, and I want to do what Seattle did, which is create units of wet housing, 75 units, controversial to some, but not to me, and I don't really think to the public, where you allow people to live who are chronically addicted to alcohol. And in Seattle, with 75 units of housing, they saved $4 million the first year.
Okay, $4 million isn't going to get you the cops, and it's not going to get you the firefighters.
$4 million will get you 4 academy classes.
and then you're going to be able to pay them once they get on the street?
Of course you are going to be able to pay because you're not paying overtime. I think that, yeah, absolutely, investing in public safety. But the mistake that we make here is that we leave things. If you look at where we are in public housing, why is it that in homeless services we put supportive housing? We say for someone who's homeless, they get support, but you put people in public housing, you give them the key to a door, and this is a family that has multi-generational problems. And somehow you think that there's not going to be violence there and the cops have to deal with it. I think we can do a lot of things smarter and bring down some of these costs. But no, my number one priority is public safety.
City Attorney Bevan Herrera. I want you to follow up to this sort of. One of the biggest tug of wars we've seen in the last couple of years at City Hall around budget time has been a tug of war between the public service, SEIU, the clerks and such, police and fire, and nonprofits. Everybody's scrambling for the same buck. It's gotten nasty sometimes. There's going to be less money coming out of Washington, less money out of the state. Basically, how are you going to handle that? In a minute.
Great question, because it comes down to how we demonstrate that we're being responsible with taxpayer dollars. We give $500 million a year to nonprofits in the city. Some of them are vital parts of our delivery system. But we need to make sure that we have accountability and rationality. And it means that we have to be better customers and they have to be better providers. That's why in 2009, I authored a report partnering with nonprofits in difficult economic times with the former director of the Department of Public Health, Sandra Hernandez, where we met for 6 months. And we had stakeholders at the table, and we came up with a series of 6 or 7 recommendations from encouraging mergers, outsourcing backroom functions, coming up with better strategic planning for financing, coming up with grant writing proposals, and we identify, and also to institute best practices within city departments. So we had city departments that were partnering with nonprofits, looking at best practices, so we reduced redundancies, and we identified tens of millions of dollars of savings that could accrue to the city without impacting the core delivery of services by those nonprofits. And we have to make sure that those nonprofit reforms that were in my 2009 report are fully implemented, because they also demand accountability from those of us in government and in the nonprofit sector. I think that some of the recommendations have started to be implemented. We need to implement those recommendations lock, stock, and barrel, and I think it will put us on a much better financial footing.
Okay, that is the big question there, is accountability, whether it be in public safety, or it be at DPW, or be it in the nonprofits. We always hear about accountability, but what could you do to ensure accountability?
I mean, you look at it, we have in our proposals and our agreements that we have with nonprofits, we have a certain amount of auditing responsibilities. We need to be not just stronger in what it is that we write, but also in practice stronger with what we enforce. And that is, we're going to require all of us in city government to make sure that we are instituting those best practices that we have identified to demand accountability from nonprofits. And you have already started to see some results based on the fact that the economy, the way that it is already driving some nonprofits to merge and rationalize service. But we need to be better in the contracts that we draft, and be much better in how those of us in government manage to demand accountability.
Rees, okay, you've been out at farmers markets. You've been knocking on doors. You've been talking to people. What have you learned to be the top priority for the voters in San Francisco that you've talked to, and what are you going to do about it?
I've heard there isn't just one top priority. I've heard 2.
Welcome to San Francisco, only 2?
2 top priorities, and it's the one I clearly talk about every step of the way here, because not only have I been out in this process, but I've been out for 2 years before that. So, number 1 issue, public education. As I stand on at bus stops in the morning or going door to door, I hear time and again, either I'm not going to be here in November, so I don't know if I can vote, because we're going to move because our child's about to enter school. And I ask people, is it the uncertainty about public education or the quality? And they say it's a bit of both, but the uncertainty about placement. I just as an example, in Bernal Heights, I talked to a woman who said, we're moving our kids go to 2 different schools. My partner had to quit her job in order to take the other child to school, but there's 20 kids on this block and they all go to different schools. So if I get sick, I can't even get a neighbor to help me. Number one issue is across the board. I absolutely believe that we have to go to neighborhood schools. I'm a huge supporter of community schools. We put a gigantic burden on teachers. We need to bring other resources like social work and after-school care, mental health professionals.
If that is what you hear, neighborhood schools, that's been an ongoing debate in San Francisco for a long time. Your mayor, what are you going to do about it?
Well, there's something going on the ballot in November, which is just a declaration, but I think it doesn't have any real teeth behind it in order to move us there. But I'm going to use the platform as the mayor to really engage what the public wants in order to make that a high-level priority. I want to put grades on schools so we understand if there's a school in a neighborhood that's not performing.
Are you talking about a ballot initiative that would say people can go to their neighborhood schools and make that?
Well, there already is one. There's one going on in
I
November.
know, but not one that isn't that you go for, and you tell the city attorney to take it to court, and we're going to fight this, and all.
No, I think we work with. Look, I've been part of something called the San Francisco School Alliance, and we have. Overall, people want neighborhood schools as a first choice, but they want quality schools. So the community already wants it. This is something we just have to implement. The community wants it.
And if the Board of Ed says no?
I think you have to work collaboratively with the Board of Ed and work through it, and I think we can make it happen.
Okay. Michela Alioto.
Here.
Yeah, what was the second issue?
I thought you were saying her name. The second issue was the constant cycle of budget deficits. People talk about it. Everybody's mentioned whether it's dirty streets or potholes or how do we get out of it. And we do that through jobs. Having jobs in the city will enable us to grow our way out of the deficit. I spend a lot of time with young entrepreneurs who start here, and when they tell me when they get to 50 or 100 employees, we move. And then when you think about the number of large employers that have left the city, AT&T, AAA, Workman's Comp, Chevron, down the line. So we have to put a structure in place that incents jobs to stay in the city. And if we can keep jobs here, people will be spending money here, and we can grow our way out of the deficit. And then budget intelligently, where we have to do bottom-up budgeting, where we go department by department and figure out what's the critical investment that we have to maintain in things like police and fire and other critical services to the community, and what, as so many of you just alluded, even on the nonprofit side, what are things that we're funding that are no longer meeting their intended purpose, and therefore we should not just continue to fund them. We have to be intelligent about how we budget so we best meet the needs for people in this community.
Michela Alioto.
Alioto-Pier.
Alioto-Pier.
My husband will be really ticked off.
He will. He'll be after me. I know that. This is a public safety forum. So, public safety question. How do you feel about gang injunctions, curfews? I've heard Oakland's talking about maybe curfews. How do you feel about gang injunctions and curfews for young? We're having a very violent problem right now.
Yes, we do. I agree with them, and I have to commend our city attorney here for the work that he's done on gang injunctions. I think that he moved and did the right thing. So I do agree with them. They have shown to work, and they've shown to lower the homicide rates. So it's clearly one step in the right direction. You'd asked me about gang injunctions. What was the other thing, Phil?
Curfews.
And curfews. Well, this goes back to a little bit of what Joanna was talking about also. When we go and look at the city's priorities, I think that she is right about neighborhood schools. And when you go out there and you have conversations with different communities, particularly the African American communities in Bayview, they have found that one of the issues that they have with their young people is that back in the 60s, when we didn't have busing, essentially, we had neighborhood schools, and the kids, when they finished their classes, would go into their churches and they'd go into their community centers where they provided a lot of services for these children. So they'd have tutors and after-school sports programs, and they'd take care of them until parents got home, and then the kids would go home. And what we've seen over the years is that now that we have children who are traveling 45 minutes across town, there is not that same cohesiveness with the communities, and the kids don't come home until late at night. We had a number of hearings at the Board of Supervisors that were shocking. You've got kids sitting on stoops in different parts of town at 3 o'clock in the morning. I couldn't believe it. You just make these automatic assumptions that children are in bed asleep. So I think that when we look at our overall health and when you look at public safety issues, our schools play a big part of that. But you know, it's only a small part, I think, of the overall issue related to public safety.
Okay, now, another quick one. This is just simple. It's going to be very simple.